Hi everyone, and welcome to this grade 9 mathematics lesson where we will be exploring the gradient of a line. My name is Miss Donnell Phillips. Let's get started. So you may be wondering, what does gradient mean? Now, gradient is another word for slope, and it tells us how steep a line is and the direction of a line. In mathematics, gradient is denoted by the lowercase m. So sometimes you may see lines that are slanted, maybe lines that are vertical or horizontal. Every single straight line has a gradient. So I have some examples of some common gradients that you may see in real life, whether it's in reality or on the television. But these are some other examples of some items that have a gradient or have a slope. We have a clothes hanger, a swing that you may see in a play park, the peak of a mountain, and even the roof on your home. Now, we have some information about gradient that we're going to be going through. The first, a line that slopes downward has a negative gradient. So any line that you see that is sloping downward, it has a gradient that is negative. A line that slopes upward has a positive gradient. A horizontal line has a gradient of 0, and a vertical line has an undefined gradient. So any horizontal line means line that runs from side to side. As long as we calculate the gradient of any horizontal line, we're going to get 0. For vertical lines now, when we calculate their gradient, the gradient is undefined. So, line sloping upwards, positive gradient. Line sloping downward, negative gradient. Horizontal lines have gradient of 0, and vertical lines have an undefined gradient. So these are some examples of a line with a positive gradient, negative gradient, 0 gradient, and an undefined gradient. So throughout the lesson or anything dealing with gradient, you may be hearing the word steep or steepness. And you may be wondering, what does that mean? Now, steepness just tells us how inclined the line is or how sharp the angle is. If you look at the graph there, we can see we have 5 different lines, and each of the lines has a different steepness. So, of these 5 lines that you could see, the steepest one would be the black line because that is getting closer to being a horizontal line. Now, if we compare the black line to the green line, the black one is steeper than the green one. In actuality, the black line on this graph is the steepest of them all. So any line that is getting closer to being a vertical line is very steep, while those that are going further, we're going closer to being a horizontal line, those lines are less steep. So the steeper the line of a graph at a point, the greater the gradient. So whenever you go to calculate the gradient, or by looking at any line, we can know that as long as it's very steep, it would have a larger gradient than those lines that may be getting closer to being horizontal. So we have 2 examples here. We have 2 graphs, graph A and graph B. Now of these 2 lines, which one has a positive gradient and which one has a negative gradient? Now we can tell by the direction or the way they slope whether it's a positive or whether it would have a positive gradient or a negative gradient. So which one of these 2 graphs is steeper than the other? Which one is steeper than the other? If you said graph B, then you're absolutely correct. Graph B is steeper than graph A. So to summarize today's lesson, gradient is another word for slope, and it tells us how steep a line is and the direction of the line. The type of line gives us information about the gradient. So, number 1, a line that slopes downwards has a negative gradient. A line that slopes upwards has a positive gradient. Horizontal lines has a gradient of 0, and vertical line has an undefined gradient. Lastly, the steeper the line of a graph at a point, the greater the gradient. This has brought us to the end of this grade 9 mathematics lesson, where we explored the gradient of a line. My name is Miss Donnell Phillips. See you next time.